Welcome to another LGBT Alliance USA discussion. We're doing an impromptu reflection on some of the things that have happened around Sophie Cunningham's statements in the WNBA and the subsequent unfortunate statements from some of the lesbian coaches and staff. So I'm going to play for Arianne and Sylvia a clip of Cheryl Reeve giving her statement about the Sophie Cunningham issue, and then ask their opinion as people who aren't as vested in the WNBA.
As I said last week, I come from a space of inclusion, and the narrative that I think that is problematic is to suggest that number one, that transgender athletes are the biggest problem in women's sports. And I think this is what's bothersome, is that there's a faction of people in our country that are making this a massive issue. We have some issues. Number one, we need to protect trans kids. Every kid, to me, it's a human rights issue. Every kid has a right to sports, regardless of gender diverse, transgender. Every kid has the right to access. Now, what gets nuanced is, when you're beyond puberty, when you're an Olympic sport, when we have scholarships at state and that sort of thing. That's where I say that common sense people get together and you find common ground to find a way to be inclusive. The answer isn't no. It is not the case that we have, quote, biological men in girls' locker rooms. The way it's being phrased, the innuendo there that somehow transgender women are predators of some kind in the locker room. There's a lot of narrative that is problematic that we need to address. That is simply not what's happening. I think we can take on the issue. There are more and more transgenders in our country as years go by. There's going to come a time. I've encouraged, years ago, I encouraged the WNBA leadership. What's our stance? What are we going to do when this occurs? Are we going to be ready? Are we going to be reactionary? And so I think it would make sense for our league to be leaders in this space. And there's again, I don't want to go so detailed. There's a lot of nuanced issues when it comes to science and hormone therapy, etc. I've chosen to educate myself about the space. I've chosen to listen to transgender families, and what I know is exclusion is not the answer. We've got to find the common ground and be inclusive. And that's a space, I think, if we all come from that. I also think like I said, the issue isn't as big as the issues that we have in women's sports. Whether it's cisgender men that have held us down for years in spaces like being able to have access to facilities and uniforms and locker rooms, all the things that these young girls that are sitting at games with anti-trans signs, do they understand actually what their real problems are and how they're being marginalized? We're still not in a space where we have equality. We don't even have the Equal Rights Amendment in all 50 states, right? So there's real issues. This is an issue that I think that we can thoughtfully work through, and that's my hope. I think Minnesota Lynx fans are some of the best fans in the WNBA, very diverse fans. It is my hope that we demonstrate leadership in this space. You can voice your opinion, have a strong opinion, but it's a safe space for everyone, regardless of whether or not we agree.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot from Cheryl Reeve. And so I'd just love to hear what your reactions are to what she had to say.
It's a lot to take in. So reading the response versus hearing her response is interesting, because I actually had more of a visceral reaction when I just read what she had said versus actually hearing it from her. Maybe that's just because I knew what was coming, so I didn't have as visceral of a reaction. But I also feel like, and maybe I'm just an optimist, there's a part of me that is like, if she's being really, truly honest about this is a place that's welcoming for all opinions, even those ones we don't agree with, that to me is huge positive, because at least she didn't say those people have no place in our courts, which is a phrase that I hear often. So that one nugget did give me a bit of hope for the whole situation. But I do feel that she's very, despite choosing to educate herself, as she said, she is quite uneducated about the other side because she clearly has no understanding of why women and girls are upset about the inclusion of biological men.
Yeah, I agree that I did feel a smidgen of hope too when I heard that, and she sort of began by talking about, oh, we have the right to free speech and express your opinions, blah blah blah. Then going to what the rest of her speech was, I had a couple of different thoughts. First, one thing that she brought up and then came back to later is this whole deflection of, oh, why do these people think this is the most important issue facing women's sports? There are other issues in women's sports that are more important. To me, that's a bit of a red herring. You're not obligated to prove this is the most important issue in women's sports to say that it's an important issue. I mean, how are you supposed to evaluate what the most important issue is anyway? I also think it's very unfair. One of the leading proponents of the Save Women's Sports campaign now is a former gymnast named Jennifer Say. Long before the trans issue was on my radar, back when I was a gymnastics fan, I remember Jennifer Say as being a whistleblower when it came to abuse in gymnastics. It had nothing to do with trans. She complained about abusive coaching. That was a threat to women's gymnastics. A lot of people dismissed her. A lot of people smeared her. She was totally vindicated later. So it is not fair to say that people who are focusing on this issue of protecting women's sports from trans-identified male athletes who want to identify onto women's teams have only been focused on this issue. A lot of them have done a lot to fight for women's sports in other ways as well. So that was a completely unfair criticism on her part. Then the second thing is, this just goes back to what I've been talking about recently. I wrote an article on it for a Substack about confronting LGBT groupthink. Because it's true that a lot of the people who have been fully on board the whole TQ plus inclusion thing are themselves LGBT. They're lesbians and or gay men or bisexuals. And there are a lot of lesbian coaches, there are a lot of lesbian players in the WNBA. And I think that a lot of it is the psychology of, well, we benefited from inclusion, or people were nice to us, when society was homophobic. I really appreciated when people were kind to us and included us. So they feel an urge to sort of reciprocate in return. And that's the image that they're trying to promote. And I think that that's a mirage because what's really happening is they are taking the talking points that they have heard from these sort of LGBTQ organizations and LGBTQ activists, and they are simply parroting it as sort of their truth. That it's good to have trans inclusion, that inclusivity is good. It's not a genuine, yes, we should do the fair thing. It's a group think. It's they're taking the common narrative that they've been fed and promoting it as the best way of being kind. And we need to call them out on that.
You said that so perfectly. We need to call them out on it, and they shouldn't get a free pass for regurgitating lines about inclusivity. One of the things that I personally found very frustrating is the fact that Shel Reeve is a lesbian, and that I understand on the one hand why she would be regurgitating LGBTQ talking points and inclusivity lines, but by the same token, as a lesbian, have reached a point of frustration, fatigue, if you will, of seeing LGBT people take that vapid, easy approach. Instead of like at the same time as she's acknowledging women haven't had equal access to sports facilities. It wasn't all that long ago that we were talking about the NCAA for LGBA. We were talking about the NCAA not providing equivalent facilities for female teams as equivalent to the male teams in, I think it was the basketball playoffs for college a few years back. Very recent. So we still don't have equality necessarily in women's sports. And for her to know all of these things and still be like, oh, well, inclusivity is what's most important here, and we have to make space for trans players. And also that she was taking out of context what was said in the first place. Sophie Cunningham's point was never that trans women are the most, you know, detrimental thing to the WNBA. That wasn't ever said. That was never part of her, what she said at all. She was just supporting biological women. And so I don't know if you also are reaching this point of frustration with other LGBs, for me, other lesbians in particular, of them throwing our own community, our sexualities under the bus and just kind of taking the hands off because they're, part of the good guys.
Well, I found something interesting too that she, was all about not excluding, not just being inclusive. Everyone has a right to play sports, which I agree with. But then she was like, but then when we get to the Olympics or beyond puberty, it gets more nuanced, and I think it's important to have common sense people talk about it. And I was just like, that's interesting to me. So you can understand at the Olympic level why there might need to be a bit more scrutiny. What's different about the women's league? Or like I was just, that was a fascinating line to be drawn for me, because I feel like if you believe in inclusion, wouldn't that be the case for every level of sport? And if not, why? For what it's worth, I don't think I haven't met I'm not saying these people don't exist, but I have not met a single person that says no trans person should play sports. It's simply let female sports be for the female people, male sports are for the male people, and then we can have a co-ed league or a trans league, or I don't know, a female and co-ed league. Like those are the three options. You got male, female, co-ed. So and one, you can have a co-ed team where it's everyone wears dresses when they play, and that's the lead. Like, I don't know, like there are solutions other than excluding girls and women from their own sports category because a male doesn't feel comfortable being recognized as a man. Um, it's so insane to me that we made it so far in women's sports, and women are still being excluded from accolades, from participating at all. Uh, and then, God forbid, a woman speaks out about it.
I have encountered that sentiment that it's not really a big deal to have trans identified males on, junior leagues and school teams. That's just transphobic when you're worried about that. But, I take seriously that maybe we should keep the elite sports single sex. I've encountered that actually quite a bit, just from people on the street or online who aren't necessarily super invested in the issue. And it seems to me, and Sylvia, you did an excellent job at explaining why there seems to be a bit of a logical fallacy involved in that. I also think there's a practical fallacy involved in that, which is that these junior leagues, these school, elementary, and high school sports are what feeds into college sports and what feeds into elite sports. And, if you're denied scholarships, if you're denied places, as a record holder for your school, or even just if the dynamics of your team are shifted by, your star player is the trans identified boy and not you, that's going to potentially impact your entire future career, including in wherever you're going, the Olympics, a professional league, whatever. So that argument, I think, needs to be tackled as well.
Yeah, those are fantastic points because what we know is that the Olympic roster for women's basketball is pulled directly from the WNBA. Our USA team is 100% WNBA. In the 2024 season, they had for the All-Star game, it was the Olympic team versus the All-Stars. And so the All-Stars, they couldn't, they had to be separate, whatever. You couldn't vote for the Olympians because they couldn't be on the team. At any rate, one leads to another, like you just said. You can't, you're not going to get to this place without having gone through the W. And what kind of came up also as a flashpoint around all of this is the French B League. So in France, there is like a step down league, I guess, of women's basketball that has been absolutely overtaken by two really, but one dominant man who is playing on the women's team. His name is Julie Tetart, and I will just also show you what what they're dealing with Julie Tetart. For those of you listening to this podcast and not watching the video, there's a video right now of Julie Tetart, a man, dominating the Women's French League. We're not using the audio for copyright reasons. He had like 30 rebounds in a game, regularly gets 20 rebounds per game, It was like their defensive player of the year, their all-star player of the year, that like just the accolades directly to this dude because he's yoked up 6'3" and playing against females. So he's just running roughshod. And so one of the things that a lot of sports analysts have been talking about now is if this is an inclusive league, what happens when you get Julie Tetart over here in the W?
It seems that Cheryl Reeves is perfectly okay with that and maybe even wants that because it'll help her win, maybe. But it's not fair to women. It's not fair to little girls aspiring to be in the WNBA. And it's exclusive to women and girls. And men have a league already, and you can go play in that. It's really that simple. It's not, that's not exclusive to be placed somewhere based on your biological sex. You're being included. You just don't want that inclusion. It's infuriating.
I can't help but feel like some of these WNBA coaches, these Cheryl Reeves of the world, sort of want to have it both ways in that they want to be inclusive and they don't want to do anything that crosses wires with the whole trans lobby. And at the same time, they also want to preserve the image of the WNBA and their own team. And I suspect they might chicken out at the thought of actually recruiting someone like that French player that you just named. I think they know that is going to be a real bad PR for them. And so they're sort of wanting to say, let's be inclusive. No, really want to do that, you know.
Well, and it's all fun and games to be inclusive until one of your players gets injured or because the other team has a man on their team, right? Like, I think we're all talking about what if that player goes to Cheryl Reeves' team? Well, what if Cheryl Reeves' team plays against a team that has a trans identifying man and then she loses her original star player? You know, like it's dangerous, particularly in contact sports, to be inclusive in this way.
It is interesting because when I grew up, WNBA was just starting to be popularized and amongst girls, and there was a big push to get more girls involved in sports. And there was a lot of focus on like the moral character that, you know, the sports can make you more competitive and more successful and more strong. There was also the more moral angle of teamwork and et cetera. It's interesting. I don't recall inclusivity per se being what was pushed when I was a kid. That seems to have been a virtue that's really, in particular, been enhanced in recent years. And I, for one, am kind of struggling with this whole idea of, sports is a way of women and girls to be strong and confident. And then when women are strong and confident by keeping their boundaries and saying we want this single sex women's only team, they're told, oh, no, 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 not in that way. Now you want to be inclusive. So I'm getting a big contradiction in my head from the message I was sent as a kid and the message that I'm getting now.
That's such a profound point, Arianne. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's like we want strong warrior women, but not like all the way. Just keep it nice, be kind, be inclusive, and then play your little game. But men get to do whatever they want. And just as long as you remember that, it's fine.
And that kind of brings me also what you just said about the to the point of her and all of these coaches ultimately referring to these as anti-trans, that this is anti-trans signs or anti-trans this or that. They are slogans of exclusively, we love you, Sophie. Thank you, Sophie. Uh, thank you for standing for women and girls sports, Sophie. Like zero mention of trans. And in the media, immediately, these pro-women rallies have been turned into anti-trans rallies. So it's again taking away from women's sports in multiple ways to offer up this notion of inclusivity and being pro-trans, but it's at the sake again of women's sports. Did that strike you also when she's referring to these rallies as anti-trans in her statement?
Absolutely. But it also honestly it's boring. Like when I first got into the women's rights game and I got inundated with hate comments and messages, it was all like, why do you hate men? Why, you're anti-man. And so this is it's the same sentence, just one word is different. You're not, they don't want to say you're anti-man, so they say you're anti-trans. But that they mean you're being anti-man. And I'm just like, can you come up with a new, like women being pro-women have been called anti-men since the beginning of the women's rights movement. So it's a tired argument and it's just a bold-faced lie. And I guess what confuses me is how people are still falling for it. I mean, I guess they did change the word man to trans, but it's clearly the same thing.
That is a brilliant point, Sylvia. That the you are a man hater is often weaponized against women who exert their boundaries and fight for their rights, and now we're just rebranding it as you're actually anti-trans as a way of making it, more of a politically correct argument now.
These are excellent points, and I am glad to say that not everyone is buying the BS. Stephen A. Smith, who is a sports analyst, has pushed back heavily on Cheryl Reeve and that notion that Sophie anywhere in her statement ever mentioned trans women being a problem in women's sports. She was exclusively advocating for biological women. So, yeah, fortunate that this has kind of created an opportunity for people who have not had any input, have not had any real engagement with this whole debate, now are thrust into it and they are speaking logically and from a place of critical thinking and common sense. That has been something that has been good to see. The unfortunate part for me as a lesbian is to see the vitriol and the reshaping and reframing of the narrative around trans and giving trans propaganda coming from lesbians.
Yes, and I want to also emphasize a point that women are real made on Twitter. There are a lot of people rallying in support of Sophie Cunningham, and a huge number of the people going to rally in support of Sophie Cunningham are also lesbians. So there are lesbians that are out there who are rallying for the sanctity of women-only sports. And then you have the lesbians who are doing their little, I would say, sellout thing.
So one of the things that we're excited about with these rallies is our participation in them. So there are a number of different women's groups who are encouraging our supporters to attend the rallies. Now, the rallies are 100% pro-woman. This is about, thank you, Sophie Cunningham. We heart you, Sophie Cunningham. You stand with women and girls. We stand with you, Sophie. There is zero messaging around trans anything. These are not aggressive protest actions. Nobody's protesting anything. They're there in rally to support Sophie Cunningham and women's sports. So if it's something that you are interested in, if you're in a nearby city where the Indiana Fever play, please go out to those rallies and support those efforts. Wear a Sophie jersey if you have one. Make a sign that says how much you appreciate Sophie and that you appreciate her standing up for sensibility, for common sense, for critical thinking, for women, for girls, and for safety in sports. The cities are everywhere from Chicago to Atlanta that they play in New York City. If you are in one of those cities and you're interested in going, you could reach out to us for more information. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this really impromptu discussion. We want to encourage you again to go out to those rallies and support Sophie Cunningham, support women's sports, and support the other women who are out there enjoying the WNBA. It's a fun league to watch. The games are great. It's a good time. And there are tons of lesbians in these spaces. So if you want to meet lesbian and bisexual women, that's the place to be these days. So I hope to see you at one of the rallies. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you in the next one.